Okay, and welcome back to part 2 of the 2017 BLCS preseason power rankings countdown. In this part, we will look at teams 8 through 5, and then hopefully by tomorrow, I can get out the top 4 teams. So if you look at these rankings maybe in tiers, I would say that yesterday those 4 teams were kind of tier 4. And then the teams we're looking at today, I would say teams 6, 7, and 8 are probably a tier 3, and then team 5 is higher than those teams and is probably a tier 2 team, and we'll get into the rest of tier 2 and tier 1 teams tomorrow. But this is where we get into the teams that really make a strong case for making the playoffs this year, maybe even have championship aspirations, especially the higher we get up on the countdown. But we're now getting into the teams that really can make a push this year and should be trying, or should already be in win mode now, and should be trying to bolster their rosters as we head into the season. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the countdown with team number 8. Number 8, the Louisville River Bats. Now, Louisville comes in with a pretty strong team this year. There is a lot to like here from this roster, and as I said, this is starting a new tier, so we're kind of in tier 3 here. And really, Louisville and the next 2 teams on this list could have been slotted in any given order. This was probably my toughest ranking as far as where to put these 3 teams or what order to put them in. Louisville fell in here at 8, but certainly could be as high as 6 on the countdown. When you look at their roster, there is a lot to like on the infield. Salazar is a great catcher. Abreu, I think, will have a bounce back year. Getting Kipnis in the Rule 5 draft was certainly a steal. And then 2 franchise players at short and third in Lindor and Sano. I think we know what Lindor is. I think he's a pretty solid top 8 shortstop at this point. Probably, won't ever be a top 2 or 3 shortstop, but certainly can solidify himself as a top 5 and really lock himself in for a long time. With Miguel Sano, this is a guy with tremendous power, has upwards of 50 home run potential. It's just going to fall into how much does he strike out. Can he keep an average high enough to balance out what he's giving you on the power end? But I think that this will be the year that Miguel Sano really breaks out and becomes a strong piece here for Louisville going forward, and I think was the reason that they were able to move Michael Franco when they did, because of Sano being able to take that spot over. And I think this was the right time for Louisville to make that move, and I applaud them for that trade. In the outfield, Starling Marte is certainly the star here, very solid. The 2 guys around him, and Jose Bautista and Andrew McCutchen, are not getting any younger. We've seen McCutchen, his numbers slide the last 2 years. I don't think he's ever going to put up the steals that he was in his younger days. However, I still think he can be a 280 to 285 hitter with 20 to 25 home runs in a very good Pittsburgh lineup. So certainly still a good bit of production from McCutchen, but not what he used to be. Bautista, injuries for the first time really hurt him last year and hurt his perception throughout the industry. However, we know hitting in Toronto, he can hit for 30 to 40 home runs. Shouldn't be a problem. The question is, can he stay healthy this year, and will he be able to get on base and hit for a high enough average, again, to not hurt Louisville? And this may be a team that sells out its batting average and goes strictly for just as much power and as much slugging as it can get, just based on some of the way that this offense is constructed. And then you look at Cole Calhoun in the utility spot. This is certainly where they would need to make an upgrade if they're going to try to make a push here in the AL, which is a very good AL this year. If Louisville's going to try to get into that second or third playoff spot, this is the spot where they're going to need to do the biggest upgrade. When you look at the starting rotation potential, this was not the best ranked starting pitching staff, and that's because of what we saw last year from Matt Harvey and Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole, I think, is a very prime candidate to bounce back and be what he was in years past. Matt Harvey, not as sure about. He just looked really bad last year, and I know there were a couple of different injury concerns, but some of the things that we're hearing and reading is these might be injury concerns that never really go away, or maybe problems that he's just going to have to pitch through for his career. Hopefully he can bounce back. It would be a huge addition when you look at adding him to Kenta Maeda, who was a good pickup for Louisville in the offseason, and then Corey Kluber, of course, came over in the Franco trade, a great pickup. So you've got 4 guys that can be SP1s or SP2s on this team. It's really going to rely a lot on Cole bouncing back, but even more so, Mount Harvey coming back and being the strong pitcher that he once was. There's not a lot of depth behind these 4 guys when you look at Adam Connolly and Dan Straley. So pitching depth can certainly, that might be an area that they need to address as the season goes on, and maybe they can pick up some pitching from one of the teams that's maybe struggling after a month or 2 goes by in the season. Looking at impact rookies, there are some pieces here that I think can help. Nobody that really overwhelms you. I think Hunter Renfroe is the star here of this class, at least for 2017, and he may need to play a big role, especially as we talked about Cole Calhoun being in that utility spot and needing an upgrade there. If Renfroe can come in and hit for some power and do some things in San Diego, then maybe he's the guy to take that spot. Additionally, on the offense, Vogelbach should play a lot in Seattle and could potentially be a source of some numbers for Louisville, but not expecting a whole lot. You've also got Rowdy Tellez, who could be the starting first baseman in Toronto, or sit in the minor leagues for most of the season. We don't really know what we're going to get on him. Fortunately for Louisville, with these 2 guys, they've already got Jose Abreu at first base, so they're comfortable there. They can be patient with both of these players and wait for the time is right to call them up. And then on the pitching side, Reynaldo Lopez is probably the only guy that's going to come up, and I really don't think this will be the year that Louisville calls him up, barring some sort of disaster on the pitching end with injuries or just, players not pitching up to their potential, and maybe Lopez comes in and pitches sooner or than we expect and better than we expect. But I wouldn't expect a lot here on the pitching side as far as impact rookies for this year. So overall, this is a Louisville team that is reliant on a few guys to bounce back on the pitching side, but the offense is certainly there. I think if they can find a way to acquire 1 or 2 pieces somewhat early in the season, this is a team that can make a push in the AL, make a push for a playoff spot, and potentially make a run at the ALCS championship. Kudos to this team for some of the moves they made in the offseason, and we expect good things not only this year, but certainly in the future from the Louisville Riverbats. Number 7, the Charleston Chew. A very solid roster here that Charleston has put together. No overwhelming strengths, no overwhelming weaknesses. I mean, pretty solid across the board when you look at their numbers. A lot of B pluses, Bs. Just really good middle to upper middle of the pack numbers here. The weak point probably on the offense here is the infield. Chris Davis can be a source of power. Jonathan Scope, not the biggest fan of him, but again, could be a source of power. Jake Lamb, same thing. And then VR is kind of the, this thing doesn't look like the others as far as the first 3 guys I talked about are low average, high power guys. And then you look at VR, he can get on base, he can steal some bases, and maybe even be a source of some power. I think that last year was legit. I think he's going to continue to play well. Gives you some flexibility. This team's some flexibility playing third and short, maybe the ability to make some moves and either move him to third base if Jake Lamb isn't what he needs to be and he can get a shortstop, or keep him there at keep VR at short and make a move for a third baseman. It gives some flexibility. You look at the outfield for this team. Charlie Blackmon is a stud. J.D. Martinez can be a stud. Trumbo hit for 40-plus home runs last year and flirted with 50, and I think can do that again. And then Kendrys Morales is one of those players that doesn't look flashy when you pick him up, but then you look at the numbers in the year and you're really pleased with what you got. So the outfield here is certainly has enough to carry this offense as this team transitions into the NL and now becomes a favorite for one of those 3 playoff spots in that league. On the pitching side, this staff is a little top-heavy. You look at Scherzer and Lester and Duffy. You've got 3 very good pitchers. Obviously, Scherzer is one of the best in baseball. Lester continues to pitch well. And Danny Duffy finally kind of came into his own last year. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to continue that again. So after those three, there's a slight drop-off when you go to Stroman. Maybe not the ERA numbers you want or the K numbers, but I think this guy is capable of being an SP 2 or 3 on some teams, and only needs to be the SP 4 here for Charleston. So they should be fine there. The back end with Ivan Nova, who pitched very well once he moved to Pittsburgh last year, and maybe continues that up. And then Davies. This is a very solid staff. So a little top-heavy, but I think the back end, there's a lot of potential there for this team to pitch well throughout the season. And then, of course, we get to impact rookies, and Charleston has one of the best in Gary Sanchez. We expect him to come in and start right away at catcher. So immediately this offense gets better right off the bat, moving him in over Austin Hedges. So when you look at that infield ranking, remember, it's going to get better because Sanchez will start the season in New York and should be hitting third for that Yankees lineup. Additionally, on offense, you look at Joey Gallo could come up and play, Austin Meadows, Ramel Tapia. So there's some guys here that could be mid to late season call-ups, but there's potential there for this team to get some help on the offensive end. On the pitching side, Jose Barrios came up last year and got lit up. Surely he's got to be better than what he showed. So it's possible that if he can come in and pitch well, that might bolster this pitching staff a little bit. So this team is probably better than even what their rankings show, possibly even better than this 7 ranking. As I said, I struggled with how to slot these Louisville and Charleston here in our next team in what order. It's possible that with everybody that's coming up, maybe Charleston could be higher on those lists, but I expect them to finish in a playoff spot in the NL and to certainly make a push in the playoffs and potentially contend for a regular season championship in their division. Number 6, Bronx Bombers. So coming in at the 6th spot is another NL team in the Bronx Bombers. This is a team that has really done a lot of good work this offseason and has, kept the pieces that they've needed to keep and acquired a few more that have really helped this team, especially heading into 2017. You look at this team's infield, Lucroy, Votto, Cano, Seager. That's the best infield in the league. There's no weaknesses here. Getting Votto for Hosmer was a great addition for Bronx here and kind of taking advantage of the situation in Austin with their cap. So that move really put this infield over the top. This is clearly the best infield in the league, and we'll need to carry this offense because when you look at the outfield, there's not a lot here to like. Schwarber, coming back from injury, is a good power hitter, but I think a lot of his value was the fact that he held catcher eligibility, which he no longer does. Also, this team doesn't really need him to because of having Lucroy. So as strictly an outfielder, I don't think that Schwarber is much better than a top 30 to top 25 outfielder at best. So really, a big name when he was coming up as a prospect, but his ranking really hurt because of him losing that catcher eligibility, because that's what really made him such a great prospect. Also in the outfield, you've got Melky Cabrera, you've got Odubel Herrera, and then Justin Turner sitting at the utility spot. Turner's probably the best of this group, but Herrera and Cabrera are just not guys that you want to be starting on your fantasy team in your outfield. You would certainly want to have better pieces than that, and this is where Bronx is going to make a move. This is where that move is going to have to be made. Now you look at the pitching. This is a very interesting staff. Darvish coming back from injury. McCullers coming back from injury. Those guys need to bounce back, along with Felix Hernandez. Needs to find the fountain of youth and regain some semblance of what he once was. If those 3 guys can bounce back from injury and Felix can find his stuff again, that's a very strong top of the rotation. When you put him with Quintana, who's very consistent, has been a very good pitcher, you've got 4 very good pitchers here in Bronx to build this rotation around. And then after that, you look at Severino and Taillon, 2 very young pitchers, just kind of waiting on them to find their stuff and break out. If this is the year, this Bronx team could really make a deep run and could really be scary and be a threat to deal with in the NL. You look at impact rookies. Yohan Moncada is obviously the big name on this list. However, He is blocked off, whether it's at second or third base, by Cano and Seager. So I don't know how much he's really going to play and be a factor. Maybe at the utility spot, but I don't know if that's, where you want him to be, or if that's the strongest move here for the Bronx. Casey Gillespie may come up and play a little bit of first base, but again, you've got Votto in front of him, so there's no real reason to. On the pitching end, Jose De Leon, I expect to be an early season call-up in Tampa. It's tough to rely on pitchers that first come up. As we saw last year with Taillon and Severino, we're now hoping in their second year, this is when we can rely on them to become the good pitchers that we expect of them. So I don't know if De Leon is going to be the answer this year. And, I've got this team ranked ahead of Charleston. However, in Charleston's ranking, I mentioned that I thought that they were a favorite for the playoff spot. And I think that's true over Bronx just because of the talent that is coming up for Charleston is going to make an impact this year a little better than Bronx. But when you look at the rosters as they are right now, and I think this ranking is appropriate, and this is going to be a very close fight. I think as the season goes on, I think Charleston has a better shot of making the postseason than the Bronx, unless Bronx can make a move to address specifically their concerns in the outfield. But I like this ranking here at 6. I'm impressed with what this front office has done to get this team together, and it's going to be exciting to watch this spot of the NL, these two teams particularly battle it out over the season for that playoff spot. Number 5, the Fulton Freak Show. Now, I can hear the front office in Fulton screaming at me from here for this number 5 ranking. However, as I said, this is the start of a new tier. This is really the start of the contenders. These are the 5 teams that we really expect to be contending for not just a regular season divisional championship, but for a BLCS championship and to win it all this year, starting here with Fulton. So while this ranking may look low to them or to some people, it's important to know that this is the start of a brand new tier and the start of the contenders, and they just happen to be the last team of Part 2, but certainly fit in with the 4 teams that we'll talk about hopefully tomorrow in Part 3 of our countdown. But you look at Fulton on their team, this is a very good offense on the infield. Gaddis holding catcher eligibility was huge for them. Getting Encarnacion, moving into Cleveland, maybe a downgrade in Park, but that lineup in Cleveland is very good, and I think he's going to drive in a lot of runs, either hitting in front of or right behind Carlos Santana. D. Gordon is back, should get back to stealing bases the way that he has done in the past. If he can hit for a high average again and score some runs, he could be a top 2 or 3 second baseman this year. Donaldson is an MVP and just an all-around stud. And then Xander Bogaerts has really kind of solidified who he is as a shortstop as far as hitting for a good average, stealing some bases, scoring some runs. And, if he gets at the top of that Red Sox lineup, he's going to do some damage on the base paths and can really put up some big numbers here for Fulton. You look at the outfield, this is where things get a little weaker. Ryan Braun and A.J. Pollock are both very good fantasy outfielders, top 15 fantasy outfielders. You're waiting on Braun to fall off. I know he's had some decline, but is still a good source of power and somehow steals and will hit for a good average. Pollock, it all depends on how he bounces back from his injury. If he bounces back and is a top 20 outfielder, that's very good. If he bounces back and becomes a top 10 or even a top 5 outfielder again, then Fulton's season will get a lot better, obviously, but that's kind of what they need here in the outfield. The third outfielder here is David Peralta, who has some ability. We just haven't seen it yet, so it's tough to really expect much from him right now, and it really hurts this ranking. And then you look at Goldschmidt at the utility spot, one of the top 10 players in all of fantasy baseball, so, an absolute stud, and there's really not much to say about him. So there are some good pieces here carried by Goldschmidt, and you've got some potential with Braun and Pollock to both be very good. I think the move they're going to need to make is to find another outfielder just to bolster this area of their offense. This pitching staff is very good, but very top-heavy. Kershaw, Kyle Hendricks, Jake Arrieta, 3 extremely good pitchers. Obviously, Kershaw is the best in baseball. Arrieta is the top 5, the top 6 starting pitcher, and Kyle Hendricks kind of found himself last year and became a fantasy stud. Behind them, you look at Roark and Skaggs and Urias. Urias can be very good, but he's going to be on a pitch limit, so we don't know exactly how much they're going to get from him, especially late in the season. I know that there's a call up here with Lucas Giolito on a trade they just made, getting rid of Adam Eaton. Same thing with Giolito is you might be able to call him up, or he may get start the season with the White Sox up. But with that pitch limit, are either Urias or Giolito going to be there for Fulton when they need them come postseason time? As far as the rest of the impact rookies, Yuli Gurriel should start at third base, or start the season at third base for Houston. Really, this team doesn't need him with Donaldson already holding down that spot. Winker and Williams should both be midseason call-ups, but again, I don't know how much they're going to give Fulton this year, but maybe they're going to need to. As we talked about that kind of weak outfield spot, maybe this is where he gets his boost sometime in the middle of the season. We talked about Giolito. He's really the only pitcher that we expect to come up and be an impact rookie. But across the board, you can see the separation here between Fulton and the three teams that were below him on this, or below this team on the ranking. Extremely good infield, solid outfield, solid starting pitching. The bullpen's a little weak, and there's not a lot of depth here. So that's, and they're not an impact rookie that's really going to come in and I think make a difference late in the season when Fulton needs it. But you can see a little bit how this team was maybe ranked at 5, but also you can see how this is a much better team than the other teams we've talked about, and this is certainly a contender if they can make the right moves or catch the right breaks. Fulton can once again be back looking, in championship contention and looking for another title here in the BLCS. So that wraps up part 2 of the BLCS preseason power ranking countdown, teams 8 through 5. I expect even more conversation here. I expect some ire from one team in particular, and then hopefully tomorrow we can get into the top 4, get into Team 4, which is is in a Tier 2 kind of with Fulton. They're together, and then we're going to get into those top 3 teams, which are really the Tier 1 teams this year for the BLCS. And but now we're getting into the contenders. It's exciting. We're getting into some really good teams, and I think the debate gets even stronger. I'd love to hear what you all think about how I slotted in teams 6, 7, and 8, and then tomorrow how Fulton kind of fell in at 5, and what you think about that. So looking forward to hearing some feedback, and certainly looking forward to talking to you guys again tomorrow about the top 4 teams here in the BLCS preseason power rankings.